Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money and millennials. Welcome, world, to another episode of Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we trade in personal finance advice for more entertaining and we like to think comedic conversations, Malcolm, sometimes.
I try.
Indeed, you do try sometimes, as do I, and money and millennials. Malcolm, what's going on with you on this great day, sir?
Another day, another dollar, as you like to say. All that good stuff.
I have some news for you, and
Okay.
I think you'll be proud of me.
We'll see.
I am now taking my own financial life seriously. What I realized looking back, I know we have a show with our.
I
know you're very
so
confused. What I realized is that I spend a lot of time thinking about the moves I need to make, but never actually make them. I just hold in the position that I've been, and I'm like, let me see what happens.
That's like the rest of America.
Yeah.
So I get email inquiries sometimes from folks that are like, my friend Ben told me you were good at what you do. I'm looking for a financial advisor. My friend Ben told me I should reach out to you. I'd like to set a meeting.
Right.
Okay, great, let's talk. And then I look and 6 years have gone by since I got an email from, because I catalog everything. So I'll look at my notes. 6 years ago is when that person first emailed me a question about should I do X, Y, Z.
Wow.
I said, let's put some time on the calendar to discuss it.
Wow.
And I never heard from him again.
Wow.
And then when we get into it, the conversation is I had just kept putting it off because I had this thing and I had that thing and I had, so it's not just you.
Right.
That's, I think, the majority of America, and that's the whole reason I have a job to begin with. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, of course. Happy to be here and happy to do it. But no, I'm at a point where I'm you know what? I'm 32. I need to start executing rather than just kind of thinking about it. I mentioned on a previous show, we just recently opened 529 plans for the girls. That was step one.
You still haven't told me which one is going to get to go to college, but I'll leave that for a different show.
We'll roll dice. And see who gets to go.
Kennedy, my vote is for you, girl. If you hear this 10 years from now, just know I bet on you.
Indeed. Well, as we do on every show, I want to first remind you of what we're talking about. Today's episode is a hot one I'm really excited about. We're talking, Malcolm, money and the marijuana industry. We're going to light it up in this piece.
It didn't take you long at all.
I gotta get it in.
Bad puns begin.
Indeed. But as we do on every show, it is now time for headlines. This headline reads, how Facebook's Libra could lead you to clean out your wallet. This was a July 2019 piece on CNBC.com by Elizabeth Mayong. It read, once Facebook's Libra makes it to the cryptocurrency mainstream, there may be a new threat to consumers, their own bad spending habits. Libra is a proposed cryptocurrency, which we've discussed before on the show, designed by Facebook and operated with a consortium of partners, including payment providers, credit card companies, and consumer companies. It's set to begin in the first half of 2020, which is not really that far off from where we are today. And in the Facebook white paper, the company maintains that Libra won't be connected to a user's data for targeted advertisements, yet the social media giant is planning to incorporate Libra payments into one of its own products used by billions of people, which leads to other concerns, experts say, and they plan on using it on Facebook Messenger and also one of their other messaging platforms, WhatsApp that they own. Possibly
Instagram too, I guess?
Possibly also Instagram. A quote from the piece said, for a number of users, that ease of access for a tool that can be used for purchases and retail consumers activity could be dangerous, especially for those who already have a difficult time keeping control of their budget. And then the story went on to say that more than a third of Americans reported that their spending is influenced by experiences on social media, according to Charles Schwab's 2019 Modern Wealth Survey. And Malcolm, I have a confession to make. I very recently purchased some very cool pairs of dress pants off of an ad I saw on Instagram, and I'm ashamed.
You should be, actually.
It was so uncharacteristic of me. I didn't even.
I have such a hard time with this whole targeted ad phenomenon.
It worked on me.
It's never gonna get any better.
Uh huh.
And I just feel like it's it's abuse almost. Like, you have now tapped into a person's deepest, darkest fears, their strongest desires.
Right.
I mean, like, you know more about that person than their spouse, their parent, their dog, like everybody. And you're using that literally against them.
Right.
So when I was a kid, I can't believe I'm about to actually have to give her credit, but when I was a kid, I used to get so sick and tired of hearing my mom saying this.
Okay.
But it has come to fruition in the form of Facebook stealing all your money. She used to tell me that just as hard as you're going to school to work, to learn, and work to make $1, there are people going to school right now working twice as hard to learn how to take it from you. This is effectively that. Like, Facebook has just said, we don't even want to be bothered physically doing the work associated with taking your money from you anymore.
Right.
We're gonna train our robots to do that work because that's so beneath us.
Right.
You're so easy to get got at this point.
Right.
We're just gonna offload that work to the robots. That's essentially what's happening here. And targeted ads, that's the phenomenon. That drives me so crazy.
And that would be made worse in this story by the effect of their quote unquote planned cryptocurrency, wherein you have some amount of money, or Facebook money we'll call it, which is called Libra, to spend on things. And theoretically, if I had Libra, I would have just traded my Libra to purchase these pants that I saw online.
And Libra doesn't mean anything. It's vapor.
It's a figment of Mark Zuckerberg's
Like, if you think
imagination.
about, so one of the, I hate to give this credit, but like our grandparents' generation, our parents' generation,
Right.
the criticism that they have against us, or one of the very many criticisms that they have against us as millennials, is that we don't hold on to $1.
Right.
And there is some truth to that,
Absolutely.
unfortunately, because of the fact that back in their day, when they were busy walking uphill both ways to school and all that other nonsense,
In the snow.
they actually had to go through the trouble of going to the bank to cash a paycheck.
Right.
Then taking that cash and going to the store to purchase the thing that they wanted to buy.
Right.
They probably didn't have 3 cars for a household of 1 person. So you had to take the bus to get there, or you had to, wait on somebody to drive you, bum a ride, whatever. All that process to get there to do the thing.
You had to really want it.
You had to really want it to spend your hard-earned money on
Right.
that thing. Now you're describing a system where I don't even have to really want it all that bad.
Right.
I just look at it and Facebook is like, done, on the way. I didn't actually take any dollars out of my pocket. I didn't even
Right.
have to log into my bank account to watch the money leave.
Right.
I just had to tap a couple coins like I'm playing a video game, and all of a sudden the pants show up 3 days later and I go, it's not really my color.
I have no idea whether or not I'm gonna be satisfied with this purchase, but they were such a design that I had not seen before that I figured I would take the risk in having those pants. So and this isn't about ads specifically. On the currency side,
There
though,
goes college.
Indeed. Sorry, girls. But the concept, there's a concept that you kind of alluded to, Malcolm. Our parents had like this real tangible, and certainly our grandparents, tangible experience with money. With Facebook, Libra, and other things like that, are we risking or experiencing the disassociation of ourselves from what our money actually is supposed to be?
We already have, with how easy it is to transfer money to people, and how easy it is to transfer that money to like stores,
Right.
Amazon or Walmart or wherever
Right.
you buy things online. I don't have to touch the money to give it over to you.
Right.
I don't even have to touch the money to get it, right?
Right.
Like, your job can direct deposit the money from their account into your account.
Right.
You never even have to log into your bank account app to see the money show up. You
Right.
just know it's the 1st and the 15th.
Right.
I should have X amount of money that just came in, and now I'm gonna go to Amazon.com and spend that money on their website, or I'm gonna, go to Target or wherever the targeted ads come from.
Right.
ASOS. I know you. So the ad shows up, you're busy reading a story about something, prepping for the show, because I know you do so much intensive research to get into the meat of the things we discuss.
Absolutely.
And all of a sudden these pants show up. You don't even have to know how much money you have in your bank account. You don't have to hand it over or count it out. It's linked up perfectly already. You got frequent flyer miles with them. So, they ask, which card do you want us to take it from? Because we got all of them. So there's no real stoppage to make me say, maybe I shouldn't spend this money.
You know what's funny? I constantly think about the fact that, I have and helped create a show called Manage Your Damn Money. And I'm actually not all that good at managing mine. So with that, I'd like to take us to a break. Malcolm Ethridge, I want to remind people.
I didn't know we were going to have a testimony on this episode. But,
I want to remind folks you always catch past episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and also Spotify, and anywhere else where you listen to podcasts. Simply search our show, Manage Your Damn Money. If you have a question or a topic you want us to cover, maybe a prayer request so you can get better at managing your money like I need, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. And if you want to catch us on social media, you can follow me at MYDM1. Malcolm, what about you?
At Malcolm on Money.
And that's on Twitter and Instagram. And you can catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where on this episode we have a very fun topic that we're excited to cover today. The topic of money and the marijuana industry. It goes by many names, my friend Malcolm. Weed, pot, 420, chronic.
Why are you so excited reading these off?
Ganja, herb, Mary J. And of course, the sticky, icky, ooh-wee. No matter what you call it, one thing is for sure, the marijuana industry is budding.
Oh, God.
And it's high time we take a look to see what's...
Let's just fast forward to next week and
skip
this show all
Let
together.
me finish. And it's high time we take a look to see what's what to understand the implications for folks like our MYDM audience. In this episode of Manage Your Damn Money, we're taking a look at the slow high tide
Oh my God.
of the marijuana industry. The future of the marijuana industry in America. This was a June 2019 piece on Investopedia.com by Deborah D'Souza covering alternative investments. It's the world's most commonly cultivated, trafficked, and used illicit drug. And as the push for legalization here in the United States and abroad grows, marijuana is garnering significant attention from investors, manufacturers, and researchers. Malcolm, first, I know you loved my puns.
Sure.
They were amazing.
The statement you made at the top of the show about trying to be funny now and then couldn't have been more accurate. Continue.
I'm sure my wife would agree with you. Despite the plant being illegal under federal law as a Schedule one drug, the U.S. legal marijuana industry was estimated at $10.4 billion in 2018, with 250,000 jobs devoted to the handling of plants, according to the New Frontier data. 10 states now have legalized marijuana for recreational use, and 33 states in the U.S. in total have legalized it for medical use, Malcolm. So obviously there's been like a cultural shift around the way that we view marijuana and the use of it for different things.
Sure.
How have you experienced it, like considering like where marijuana and weed was when we were a kid to where we are now?
So it's so tough for me listening to these conversations being batted around at presidential debates and all that kind of stuff, where the question now is, should we legalize marijuana? And it's a significant conversation, right? Like we had President Clinton and then Bush in between him and Obama.
Right.
When Bill Clinton was president, he said something about smoking weed in college, and it was this huge hubbub.
Right.
And it was the worst thing in the world, and everybody was like, I can't believe he just admitted that. Why would he do such a thing?
He said he didn't inhale.
Then Barack Obama, fast forward, I don't know, what is that, 12 years or something, says, yeah, sure, I smoked weed in college.
Right.
And people are like, oh, okay.
All right.
Cool.
Right.
So what?
Whatever.
And it's just like, how does that, so that's one. But secondly, and more importantly, I have a really hard time listening to this conversation about the legalization of marijuana with so many hundreds of thousands of black and brown people in jail right now for possession charges, nonviolent offenses related to marijuana.
Right.
All they had was, enough to consume on their own, which has now been the amount that's legalized. I don't even know what the amount is, but it's low enough that like you won't go to jail.
Right.
But if you're gonna legalize for the new entrants into the system, then what about the people who are currently doing jail time for that old crime under the old system? So to me, though, that needs to be squared first before I can legitimately say like, okay, we're making strides as a culture to see marijuana differently.
And I do believe in my research for this, I feel like I saw like a city or a municipality, I think it was Chicago maybe, where they're taking steps to actually expunge the records of those who were.
What's the step?
Right. It's some legislation.
Open the door and say bye.
What are we waiting
like,
for?
I don't understand why it needs to be debated and discussed and kicked around and ideated and all that other crap. Like, if you now can grow a whole field of weed out in Colorado and nobody even bothers to ask you any questions about what you're doing, why you're doing it, then for the person who was walking home from school one day, got stopped by the police and had some small insignificant amount on them and has been in jail for the last 4 years, how is that an equal, view? So to me, it's just like, let's stop talking about it and talking about how we have to figure out how to get there.
And just do it.
And just do it. Like, if you want us to all start from the same place and have this large, high-minded conversation, pardon the pun, about marijuana, let's start from zero and all come to the same place first.
Absolutely. A Pew Research survey says that 62% of Americans believe the use of marijuana should be legalized, which is a majority. This is double what it was in 2000. To your point, Malcolm, it's progressed in a very short amount of time. And 5 times what it was in 1969, which was just 12%. A New York University study revealed the percentage of adults aged 50 to 64 reporting marijuana use has doubled in the past decade to 9%. And use among adults 65 and older has increased 7 times during the same period to nearly 3%. The U.S. marijuana industry will generate $17.5 billion in tax revenue by 2030, according to analyst Vivian Azer. Since the explosion of marijuana products is almost certain, experts are now pondering what the industry might look like. Will large corporations dominate it and flood the market with cheap generic products or something else? Technology is also shaping the industry. Weed delivery company Ease has raised $37 million and is reportedly valued at $300 million. It recently announced it's creating a platform to ship CBD products to 41 different states, and CBD is like a derivative of the plant of marijuana or whatever. And then also on-demand marijuana and cannabis delivery service Dutchie last year raised $3 million from venture capital firms of rapper Snoop Dogg and basketball player Kevin Durant, among others. So what is the professional wealth management community saying about the industry right now? Because it's at that early stage. Where
nothing publicly.
Okay.
So most, if not all, U.S. major brokerage houses have completely taken a hands-off approach to this.
Okay.
So there are some smaller self-directed online brokerage firms that will allow you to buy marijuana-related stocks in your account, and you've got to buy it yourself. You can't even have somebody like me do it on your behalf.
Right.
But for the most part, Wall Street has stayed completely away.
Right.
That said, that is publicly.
Right.
In the background, everybody is working on this strategy for if and when the day comes. Because as you pointed out, we're moving very fast.
And it ultimately has to get removed. I think two things. Well, we'll get into what those two things are in a second. But a couple things have to happen for people for everyone to rush in, so to speak.
The big thing is the U.S. government has to decriminalize it and move it from a Class A or whatever Schedule 1 drug down to something less heinous.
Right.
Because it's up there with everything else that'll like turn your skin inside out. And,
right.
You know. So it's like that has to happen first and foremost.
Right.
And as soon as it does, the floodgates are going to open up.
Right.
So I think Wall Street in the shadows is ready for it, but publicly is like kind of like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. They're like, we don't really want to touch it just yet,
right.
But we're ready when you are.
Right. Absolutely. And a little bit about the policy, the implications. Politico pointed out that 296 members of Congress, which is 68%, representing 33 states with at least medical marijuana, which means there are sufficient votes to pass the long-awaited bills. There are already several in the new Congress pertaining to marijuana. And then also another big component which inhibits or prohibits larger institutions from getting involved, handling of the money. And this is the other thing coupled with the Schedule 1 drug thing. Big banks are currently afraid of money laundering charges they may face if they work with businesses. Besides the difficulty of getting capital, this means there's a tremendous risk and inconvenience for companies operating in cash. And if that's not clear, a lot of these dispensaries and companies that sell direct marijuana products to consumers, you can only buy in cash because they cannot deposit their money into actual banks because of restrictions around where the money came from. It's a drug.
And it's still illegal.
It's still
Schedule 1.
Right. It may be legal according to Colorado, but it's not.
The moment that goes away,
right,
banks will take your money.
Right.
Gladly.
Right.
But I think a key difference is you just mentioned it's a $10 billion industry right now. The government entities that get their slice of that, 30-40%, somewhere in that range, they're getting $3-4 billion of cash.
Right.
So imagine if and when a grower is allowed to borrow to grow.
Right.
Literally and figuratively, like to grow their business, but also to grow their product.
Right.
So Amazon, for example, part of the reason Amazon is as big as it is, as fast as it is because they were able to borrow against their assets again and again and again.
Right.
To continue to build that business.
Right.
Same thing with the marijuana industry. If I was allowed to take out a business loan to grow my business, I could grow it a heck of a lot faster than if I had to do it with just the cash that comes in every day.
Right.
You know, what we refer to it as cash flowing the business.
Right.
So that alone is going to blow it up out of proportion.
Right.
And that's part of the reason I say that folks are like licking their chops in the background
to get in
as soon as the Fed has enough momentum and enough probably younger people in Congress to move it off the list and say, let's go.
Right, absolutely. Are there any other industries that you can think of, Malcolm, that kind of felt like this in the past where there's interest, there's momentum, culturally it's a right fit, or it seems as if it's a right fit, and everyone's sitting on the sidelines waiting to get in? Is there anything we can compare it to?
Cryptocurrency was really the only thing I could think of along those lines. And obviously that's still fresh and new and cool and hip and all that also. But like, that's the only thing I could think of that like in our lifetime is that closely linked. I mean, at first there was some hesitancy around the internet in general.
Sure.
And people were like, the internet will never work.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we can't live without it. Right. But you didn't really have the government trying to get in the way of it the way that you did with cryptocurrency still. Right. And marijuana more so. Right. So that's really the only one that I could really think of that plays against it perfectly.
Indeed, indeed. When we come back from our second music break, we're going to continue the discussion on money and marijuana and the marijuana industry. I want to remind you, you can always catch past episodes on our show as a podcast on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Simply search Manage Your Damn Money. And of course, if you have a question or a suggestion for a show topic, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. If you want to catch us on social media, you can follow us at MYDM1. Malcolm, how about you?
At Malcolm on Money.
And of course, you can always catch us on the good old Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney, and join our Facebook group as well. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we are discussing money in the marijuana industry. And if you're wondering why we're talking about the marijuana industry, it's because there are some elements which feel as if some money could be made at some point on the industry, hence why we thought we'd talk about it. Another story that we pulled for this particular show is the economic benefits of legalizing weed. This was a June 2019 piece on Investopedia.com. It read, better than expected sales of marijuana in Colorado and Washington over the past several years have resulted in buoyant tax revenues. In 2015, Colorado collected more than $135 million in taxes and fees on medical and recreational marijuana. Sales in the state totaled over, get this, Malcolm, $996 million, which is almost $1 billion in sales behind marijuana. Sales in North America grew 30% to $6.7 billion in 2016 and is projected to increase to $20.1 billion by 2021. Local research supports this view as well. A report from the Colorado State University's Pueblo's Institute of Cannabis Research, and we have institutes of cannabis now, recently found that legal cannabis industry has contributed more than $58 million to the local economy, primarily through taxes and other fees.
That's what matters.
Right, indeed, the taxes and fees.
That tax revenue is what really matters.
Absolutely. And should marijuana become legal on a federal level, which is the huge caveat that we discussed earlier, the benefits to the economy could be exceptional. A report from the cannabis analytics company New Frontier suggests that federally legal pot could generate an additional $131 billion in aggregate federal tax revenue by 2025. It sounds like a lot of gaps would be solved there in the government.
Presumably. Because there's a lot of room for fraud.
Right.
So, at some point you initially thought when we were a manufacturing country,
right,
if we allow more people to open manufacturing plants and subsidize the opening of manufacturing plants, it'll bring all these jobs to these Midwestern cities, and everybody will be so much better off because the tax revenue will justify the initial investment.
Sure.
But then those companies did what? They spent a whole bunch of money hiring lobbyists to go to Congress to
change
convince
laws,
them to write new laws into the tax code.
Right.
And now nobody pays taxes but you and I. So if you think about it the same way, those folks who really figure out how to make legitimate money in that industry
right,
are going to have what's called the first mover advantage,
right,
where basically because they were the first ones there, they know the lay of the land. They
right,
probably will make the first real money.
Right.
They're going to hire lobbyists to do exactly what the tech companies did 30 years ago,
right,
to make sure that they get as much of a break as they possibly can.
Absolutely.
So, presumably those numbers sound great, right? But it's just going to be the folks who are the laggards to the party that end up paying the brunt of the tax.
And that's based on current tax code, which is not informed by people pursuing one change or another in the tax laws or tax code, which is a good point, Malcolm. Another piece that we pulled for this show, the weed industry's biggest secret, what everyone gets paid, and this was an April 2019 piece on Fortune.com by Chris Morris. Number one, CEOs of various marijuana-based companies. The average salary of a cannabis company CEO at one of the industry's 5 major companies is about $500,000, just over. And then also compare that to the national estimate for CEOs, which is only $196,000. So you can make a lot of money if you're a CEO of a marijuana company, apparently.
You probably have to start it, though.
Yeah.
From scratch.
Yeah, that's probably, you can't get the job as the CEO.
Like, what are your qualifications that you walk in with and say, I'm qualified to be the CEO of this legal drug trade?
Right.
I would be interested to see that person's resume.
That would be hilarious to look at. Let's post a job. CEO.
You spent 12 years in county jail, and so you deserved, I don't know what you like.
That's funny. Then also there's dispensary manager running a cannabis shop. Whether medical or recreational means keeping a close eye on local laws. The average manager brings home around $68,000, which is over $11,000 more than a food service manager. And then Maryland and Massachusetts are actually the highest paying for those.
I would have expected that to be higher.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that too.
Like the dispensary manager, in my opinion, it sounds like from reading this,
sounds like a store manager or something.
That person is like the equivalent of a branch manager at a bank.
Yes.
Where you've got to make sure that you're within compliance of all the rules and you're only selling to people who have the right licensing and you've got the right forms of identification and all that jazz. So if a branch manager at a big enough bank in a major metro area like DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia, something like that, could make $100,000.
Right.
It's surprising to me that the branch manager of a weed bank doesn't make more than that on average, but I guess that means that they still have some more room to grow. Right.
Also, edibles producer, the chefs of the weed world bring in an average salary of $46,000, which is about $3,000 less than chefs and head cooks in the food service industry. So it's still not necessarily in your best interest as a chef to go into that industry. Then we have something called a bud tender as opposed to bartender.
That was a new one for me.
Bud tender?
Yeah.
For some reason, I'm thinking about Homer Simpson and Duff beer. But anyways, the person behind the counter at a dispensary acts as both the counselor and cashier, helping shoppers find the strain they're looking for and answering questions from newcomers. On average, they earn $32,000. That's $5,900 more than the average bartender and $4,700 more than a retail salesperson, says the magazine. California, Colorado, Illinois, Maryland, and Massachusetts pay the most in that department. And then lastly, there's a bud trimmer. Trimming is an essential step to harvesting marijuana. It's not an easy job, but doesn't require an advanced degree. The position pays an average of $29,000, and the best paying jobs are in Colorado rather than California or Washington. So Malcolm, we just talked about one of the countless cases of being made to use marijuana industry as a tax buoy for states and cities and potentially the federal government, as well as some positions that are kind of finding their way to the top as the industry is establishing itself. What cues do these elements give you to where the industry is headed?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like I said, you have the folks who are the first ones there that'll get that first mover advantage, that'll make all the money when there's money to be made on the front end, right?
Right.
But those people also took the most risk, because for all of these stories that you'll read about the CEO, for example, of a major marijuana company that makes $1.5 million a year, you've got the farmer who has been growing for the last 5-6 years
Right.
and is going out of business.
Right.
So I was actually watching a documentary on, I want to say Netflix, not too long ago, and there was 3 different growers that they were following, and they all kind of like fell on hard times because they initially came into this thinking it was going to be one big party.
Like Gold Rush.
Like Gold Rush, essentially. Then they were in California, ironically, and they were looking at it saying, the government's going to legalize it, you guys just wait.
Right.
You're going to be sad that you missed out.
It's coming.
And that was in like 2005 or 6. And so for the 5, 6, 7, 8 year period that they were, they had established their farm and all that kind of stuff, one bad growing season and you're completely wiped out.
Right.
Or your biggest client finds a better supplier, you're completely wiped out.
Right.
And so then they were like going to try and lobby Congress to now count them as farmers so that they can get subsidies that farmers get, all those kind of things. And the government was like,
we ain't doing that.
So it was just interesting to me that, for those folks who can like brave the storm,
Right.
there probably will be riches there to be had.
Right.
But it's like, how long can you hold on?
And how long will it take to get to the point where you're at full legalization and full everything?
And who really is to say? Because it's not something that unilaterally the president could do, regardless of how many empty promises the 29.5 people running for the president on the Democrat side right now would promise you.
Right.
None of them have the power to unilaterally decide, I'm going to legalize it today.
Right.
So who knows how long it actually takes.
It could take a lot longer than people expect. Another quick piece that we have here, recreational marijuana in California did not turn out to be the cash crop the state and the cannabis industry expected. So this is actually a different slanting story. This was a December 2018 piece on theroot.com by Monique Judge. The Los Angeles Times reports, she writes, that retailers and growers are feeling the burn from a complex system of regulations, high taxes.
So many terrible puns in here.
And large number of cities within the state that have decided to outright ban cannabis shops. Add that to the residents of many cities who consider marijuana businesses to be nuisances, those who voice their concerns in city council meetings and courtrooms, as well as the unregulated black market that refuses to go away, the traditional way that people have purchased weed for many decades. And you have a problematic concentration of weeds that stunt the growth of any entrepreneurial seeds that may be planted. As the Los Angeles Times notes, she writes, when recreational marijuana became legal with the passage of Proposition 64, state officials projected that there would be as many as 6,000 licensed cannabis shops within the first few years, and the industry was expected to bring in $1 billion in revenue. Those were projections, not actual numbers. It wasn't how things turned out. Currently, the State Bureau of Cannabis Control has only issued 547 temporary annual licenses to marijuana retail stores and dispensaries, and state tax revenue is projected to be just $471 million. And Governor Jerry Brown's initial budget forecasted $630 million in tax revenue. So that's a huge gap in what was expected versus what the reality is. So this portion of the story, Malcolm, or this particular story, kind of reminds us how complicated and complex emerging industries can be. Mm-hmm. What does that tell you about the road that the marijuana industry has to travel in terms of becoming an established and profitable space and arena?
Well, I think also what you just outlined, California having a tough go of it in the beginning, stalled the growth.
Sure.
Because I think everybody was watching what happened over in California saying, well, they'll be our test case.
Right.
If it actually proves out the way they've been pounding their chest for the last, 50 years, basically saying, you guys are missing the boat. This is something we should all be doing, and it should be normalized. And everybody was like, beat it, hippie. And now all of a sudden, everybody's like, we'll give California a chance. We'll see what happens. I think because they didn't have the huge blowout results that everybody was hoping for, it kind of made people go, well, I don't know if I'm willing to take that chance politically, because I don't stand to gain necessarily as much as we thought I did by, jumping out there. So I think, again, it's one of those things that it's just going to have to become as we get younger and younger in our representation, all of a sudden people's views shift because like suddenly you don't have your parents and grandparents saying like, stay off the weed, and as Stephen A. Smith would put it. You've got folks that are like, do you? Which I think is more what our society is becoming. Not necessarily people who have a strong stance for or against in unison, but more and more people who are like, do you?
Right. And another quick little piece about California in particular. Of the 482 cities in California, only 89 allow recreational marijuana sales. And that's just 20% of the varying taxes. That's just 20% of the cities in the state. And varying taxes in those areas can drive the cost of a legal purchase up by up to 45%, according to the Times, which compared to Oregon, a state with a 20% cap on marijuana taxes. Oregon has a tenth of the population of California, but has more legalized shops, 601 to be exact. So what's also true is that the local landscape of how things play out can also have an effect on the growth of an industry like the marijuana industry, Malcolm. Some real quick questions before we wrap the show. Are there any kinds of ways for people, we get questions and here at our studio where we shoot the show and also in the world, is there any way to kind of see on the horizon who the players are going to be and maybe even how an individual, a regular person, could stand to gain from some of the activity happening in the space?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, there's several states that have, if not legalized, but they like to say decriminalized marijuana at this point.
Right.
So there's plenty of states that have businesses, local businesses, that would greatly welcome your cash infusion as an investor, right? So if you're a person who has significant enough means and discretionary enough income that you could make an investment in a private business, there's a lot of people out there who would love to see you coming.
Right.
There's also people who are using their celebrity right now to partner with those same companies I'm talking about to help promote it and the culture. And Snoop aside, he's been kind of a pioneer.
He's an early adopter.
Since Gin and Juice, probably.
Right.
But the folks behind him, like for example, former Speaker of the House, John Boehner, who spent his entire time in Congress talking about how it was going to ruin the world.
Let's not talk about him.
And the moment he gets out of Congress,
right,
all of a sudden I see him on CNBC talking about how he's got this new venture he's involved in. They're going to help make marijuana legal.
Right.
And I was so upset watching this. Because that is the kind of thinking and the kind of culture that I'm talking about that prevents us from making any significant kind of progress.
Right.
Everybody who's just trying to score political points and doesn't really have a position one way or another, but they've got to pretend like they do because it suits them today as far as their politics are concerned.
Right, absolutely. So just if you were to make any kind of forecast, your personal opinion, where do you see the marijuana industry going?
I see the marijuana industry leaving us behind. And by us, I mean the United States of America. I have seen time and time again stories that are from places like Canada, even as close as that is to us, and other places in Europe where they've already gotten to the point where as a society everybody's like, nah, it's, whatever,
it's fine,
like it's cool, you know, I don't necessarily partake, but hey, like I said, do you? And then the other people that are like, oh, it's time to celebrate. So when I look around the globe, the rest of the world is busy saying, let's figure out a way to all profit from this because we could all use a few extra dollars. How else are we going to get that universal basic income if we don't have, some extra weed money coming in? And the United States is so busy arguing about this day in and day out like we do with everything else that has a little teeny fraction of a political motive to it. I think we're actually going to get left behind in this. So if you have the ability to invest in another country, that's where the money is going to be made probably hand over fist in comparison to here.
Indeed. Well, this has been an excellent conversation about marijuana and money here on Manage Your Damn Money. Just a topic we really had been thinking about since I think last year sometime in 2018. That's when we first kicked it around.
Time is moving fast.
Indeed,
I think
man.
You're right.
Indeed, we're getting old.
You have to dig in the archives to, anyway.
Indeed. Well, we want to remind people you can always catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Please leave us a review on any of those platforms. That helps more people catch the show. If you have questions or you have a suggestion on a topic you'd like us to cover, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. If you want to catch us on social media, you can do so at MYDM1. Malcolm, what's yours?
At Malcolm on Money.
And that's, of course, on Twitter and on Instagram. And you can catch us on social, also on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. Thanks once again to our partners here at Montgomery Community Media for their hospitality and having us film our show in their studios. Until next time, be good with your money.
Peace.
Peace.